regular meeting. Welcome to the regular meeting of the Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee on Wednesday, June 1st, 2022. The time is 6:02 p.m. I'll request Lauren to call the roll.
Member Allison. Member Bergman.
Here.
Chair Haggerty.
Here.
Member Mooney. Member Powers.
Here.
Member Solomon.
Here.
Alternate member Coyne.
Here.
I just want to note that Phil Mooney is here as an attendee, so I don't know how you want to account for him, but you should probably be shown as being present.
I just promoted Phil to panelist.
Okay, great. So welcome, Philip. You're handling this next part, Lauren?
Okay, this meeting is being held virtually and viewers are welcome to provide public comment online or by telephone at 669-900-9128. The meeting ID is 921-3171-9828 pound and password 071169. If you're watching the meeting and wish to provide public comment, please select the participants icon and select raise hand. If you are participating by telephone and wish to provide public comments, please press *9 when the chair opens the public comment period. When it is your time to speak, you will hear a notification that you've been unmuted. Press *6 to unmute yourself and you'll have 2 minutes to speak.
Second item is approval of meeting minutes. Do any of the members have any questions or comments? Seeing none, do any members of the public have comments regarding the meeting minutes? If not, I'll close the public comment. And do we need to formally approve the minutes, Lauren?
You can just go if anyone is opposed. So I can say that. Is anyone opposed to approving the meeting minutes? Hearing none, I think it passes.
So I'll also let the record show that AJ is here and as well as Philip.
Sorry, I was logged in earlier, but I was an attendee for some reason. So during the roll call, I couldn't chime in.
So the next agenda item is public comments on items not on the agenda. You'll have 2 minutes each. This is time for the public to comment on topics not on the agenda. We value public attendance and participation at BPAC meetings. Thank you for attending. In accordance with the Brown Act, BPAC will not discuss items that are not on the agenda, but your comments will be noted in the meeting minutes. In some cases, DPW staff may reach out directly regarding specific concerns, and some topics may become agenda items for future BPAC meetings. Your comments must be limited to 2 minutes, and I'm going to make an effort to stick to that time frame.
Thanks, Kevin. If you wish to speak, please either use the raise hand function or if you are on the telephone, press *9. Looks like we have one public comment, Jean Severinghouse.
Thank you and good evening, everyone. I wanted to just bring up that my neighbor was hit at A Street going north on A at 2nd by a car that cooperated, but he backed into him because he thought he saw a pedestrian in the crosswalk. So my neighbor has now had multiple pins in his hip and he's pretty ill. So it made me start thinking, what could be designed at that intersection at A and 2nd that could potentially make it more obvious. And then I thought, well, maybe a protected intersection with, kind of real islands that go out would make it more obvious to a driver. I mean, the driver was clearly at fault. He faulted. I just got the police report. he backed into him and hit him. So anyway, I just wanted to bring that up. I don't know how to discuss that with the BPAC, but I wanted to put a little marker that somehow I'd like to do that in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Jane. Is that's city staff? Is that something you can look at? Thank you.
Yeah.
Seeing no other comments, we'll move on to item number 4, which is the City of San Rafael transfer tax. And tonight to speak on that is Paul Cohn. Paul?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, members of the public. My name is Paul Cohen, principal at PM Cohen Public Affairs, and I'm part of a consulting team that's been hired by the City of San Rafael to evaluate a potential revenue measure to fund infrastructure repairs in the city. As you may know, local governments are fairly limited in what they can do in terms of taxes. San Rafael is already close to the limit on local sales tax. And cities cannot do income taxes, for example. One of the options that is available specifically to charter cities such as the City of San Rafael is a real estate transfer tax. And San Rafael already has a real estate transfer tax, which is 0.2% of the sales price of a home. And that is paid between the buyer and seller. It becomes part of the cost of the transaction. Depends on who you talk to as far as who pays it. It basically gets folded into the price of the home, and then becomes a subject of negotiation between buyer and seller as to who picks that up. One option for the city is to increase the amount of the transfer tax. And what we're evaluating is the potential of increasing it by 1%. So it becomes, instead of 0.2, it would become 1.2. That would generate about $8 million a year in revenue based on the last several years of real estate sales in San Rafael. And this, by the way, applies to both residential and commercial transactions. It's based on the last few years of real estate sales and the overall the dollar value of those sales. It's estimated. It's not certain because it could vary from year to year, but it's estimated on average to be about $8 million a year. The reason the city is looking at this is that, as you know, San Rafael is one of the oldest communities in the state, founded in 1874, and some of our infrastructure, despite ongoing efforts to address it, continues to reflect that. There's aging infrastructure that needs repair and improvement. There's over 330 miles of streets that require ongoing pothole repair, repaving. Sidewalks, as you know, are always a challenge. Some of those in residential areas are now the responsibility of homeowners, but there's a lot of sidewalk area in San Rafael that's not covered by that. And then older buildings such as the downtown San Rafael Carnegie Library that do not meet earthquake standards and require updates to both for public safety and improve programming ability. There's also a possibility with the development being considered in North San Rafael at the Northgate Mall of a library branch there that would require some investment. So, we're engaged in a process of community outreach, and I just wanted to bring this to your attention. Happy to take any questions from members of the commission. I want to be clear about a couple things. This is not by any means a decision that has been made. It is something that the council will evaluate. Should they choose to move forward after we come to a recommendation on it, they have to make that decision by the end of July, the beginning of August, and then it would become a ballot measure, and San Rafael voters would be asked to decide. What's under consideration is a general tax, which requires 50% plus one approval of those voting in November. And because of that, it's not earmarked for specific things. It's aimed at categories along the lines that I mentioned: streets, storm drains, sidewalks, older buildings, including the Carnegie Library, parks are all things that would probably be in the measure. You can see in terms of what's shown on the screen the list of items under locally controlled funding for local needs that we're considering the city evaluate. Ultimately, if the measure passes, it would be a council decision about how to allocate those dollars to the greatest benefit of the residents of San Rafael on an annual basis. Probably looking at a 9-year term for this, after which it would need to be renewed. So probably a lot to throw at you all at once, but I'll be happy to, not an action item, but I think it's probably appropriate to take some questions if there are any from members of the commission, or for that matter, Mr. Chair, if you wish, from members of the public.
Let's ask our members if they have any questions first.
Kevin, I have a couple.
Yeah, go ahead, Mark.
Thanks. Paul, hey, appreciate being here this evening with us. And I, just to preface everything, I generally support the concept. So, but I did have a couple questions in general for you. Are you looking, or did you look at other options besides just transfer tax concept? And then second question is related to public outreach. Hold that first for now.
Yeah, I mean, there really a kind of a limited range of types of taxes that the city can impose. So, I mean, there's sales tax, there's partial tax. Partial taxes are generally not viewed very favorably. They're okay. People feel okay for schools, but not in a broader sense. So, it's our recommendation, if this is to have any chance of succeeding, we wouldn't recommend the council put something on the ballot just to kind of wing it. We would recommend that they put something on that we think has a reasonable chance of convincing San Rafael voters to support it. And this seems like the most viable option. It's not an every year tax. It's paid upon the sale of a home when there's a lot of money changing hands. Seemed like a viable alternative.
My follow-up to that then would be, given the direction the economy seems to be going and the temperature out there, and just in the U.S. in general, in terms of the economy, and you're doing the outreach right now. I assume that outreach is to test the waters and get a sense of how this might be handled. Is it favorable or not amongst the voters? Are you doing that right now? Is that part of what you're charged with?
Yes, and there'll be some more. I've been meeting with a number of the boards and commissions and some of the neighborhood groups. The city, before I actually was engaged in this project, the city did commission a poll. But kind of to your point, Mark, that was done a few months ago, and polls are a snapshot in time. My anticipation is that we would probably end up recommending that the city do another what's called the tracking poll. It would be shorter than the one that was done originally. It would kind of narrow in on what's really to be considered. And that is something the city can do with public dollars. And they probably would, if I would think, I would recommend to the council, they'd want to have that, a more scientific opinion poll in hand before deciding to go to the expense of placing something on the ballot. Keep in mind that when I say the expense, the campaign itself can't be done with public dollars. It's a political campaign, so no tax money, but the city will have to pay the county for the cost of conducting the election. So it's not without some cost. And, I'm sure the council wants to make a prudent decision based on some realistic chance of success. So our plan is to continue over the next month or so to communicate with the public. There's going to be information on the city's website with a page devoted to this. We're looking at doing a mailer that with a tear off reply card that asks people for their thoughts about whether or not this is an approach that makes sense, how the money ought to be allocated, what are the biggest priorities for the community, those kind of things. And our job is to sort of do the outreach, pull together all of the responses and make a recommendation to staff and ultimately to the council.
I
Thanks,
think
Paul.
Kate is next and then Ann.
Hi, thanks, Paul, for your present or for your bringing this to us. I had a couple of questions. So for $1 million home, if you sell your $1 million home, you would pay $10,000 in a transfer tax, or either the buyer or the seller would, or
Right.
some combination thereof. If you only have $200,000 worth of equity in your house, then you have to pay $10,000 for the transfer tax. I think for me, the sticking one of the variables is how much equity people have in their homes, because it's a larger percentage of what you pay determining what you're out of pocket, depending on the equity that you have built up in your homes. So I think that's something to consider. And then the other thing that I just wanted to ask is, how are the infrastructure facilities now being paid for that would be paid for with this $8 million? Like, how are parks maintenance being paid for? How are the stormwater infrastructure improvements being paid for? What funding sources would this replace, if any? Or is the city really $8 million shortfall on continuing to make those improvements?
So let me unpack that a little bit. So first of all, I take your point about a differential impact. On the other hand, I've lived in San Rafael for 30 years in the same home. So my property tax is a lot less than the two young families that live on either side of me who bought their homes within the last couple of years. So we already have, we have some real questions about equity in terms of taxation in California and the way things are structured. And part of that is, honestly, Prop 13. But cities have limited options for the types of taxes that they can adopt. So the city cannot do anything that's differential based on the value of the home. Like to say, okay, well, people below this certain amount or below a certain amount of equity in the home don't have to pay it. And the city can't do anything that approaches an income tax. So there's always going to be issues like that. Not as familiar with the state of the city's budget as I perhaps once was. I don't think that this is intended either to fill a hole or to replace current funding. I think that's a combination of grant funds, general fund revenue, and specific sources of revenue that have been earmarked for maintaining city's infrastructure. Given all that, there's an ongoing shortfall. There's a discrepancy between the need for the kind of things described in this proposal and the amount of funding available to the city through current revenue sources. So basically, the need goes unmet, or we find other sources of revenue. My understanding from talking with staff is the intent here is to leverage this money and seek grant funding, wherever possible from whatever sources, state and federal, that it might be available depending on the nature of the project. And there is money out there. For example, I'm aware there's money out there for library improvements, but there's a requirement of a local share. So you can't go out and get a grant fund. You can't get grant funding to improve the Carnegie Library unless there's a local stake in it. And this would provide that because the city doesn't currently have that. So it's not necessarily, I don't think it's replacing current funds. I think it's to supplement the funding that the city currently has to meet needs that are currently going unmet. So I hope that answers your question.
Okay, let's move on to Ann.
Yes, thank you, Paul, for your presentation. I wanted to know what other cities or communities in Marin County have a transfer tax and what percentage are they at?
So interesting question. San Rafael currently is the only charter city in Marin County, and it's only charter cities that can adopt transfer taxes. So the baseline answer to your question would be none. However, I recently consulted with the city of Belvedere, and Belvedere is, by all indications, moving forward with a ballot measure in November that will actually be two measures. One will be to adopt a city charter, and the only change to the city's operation would be to allow it to adopt a transfer tax. And the second would be to adopt a 1% transfer tax for sales in Belvedere. As you can imagine, a 1% transfer tax in San Rafael would generate a significantly larger amount of revenue than San Rafael, I believe. At least the average sale price is significantly higher. Let's put it that way. And they are looking at public safety needs having to do with the roads to the island, and vulnerability to seismic disruption and erosion, et cetera. And they've been sort of working on those roads piecemeal and are looking for a way to make a significant investment in upgrading those roads, which were originally built on sandbars. But if they adopt that, I believe that they will be the second charter city in Marin County, and they'll have a comparable transfer tax rate if those companion measures are successful in November.
Okay, let's move on to DJ.
Hi, yeah, what was my question? So this is kind of getting to Kate's point. This is already a really unaffordable place to live, right? So we're sort of eroding the ability of home buyers to buy homes here. And I think, one thing that's a little bit just, concerning about this measure is that, we're asking people who largely are never going to pay this tax to decide if new people are going to pay this tax, right? Because you're largely talking about people moving into San Rafael probably, and people who live here already that are not ever going to pay the tax are deciding whether or not those people should pay the tax. Also you talk about the term of 9 years. It's been a seller's market for 9 years, and I don't have any reason to think it's not going to be a seller's market anytime soon. And so it's the buyer is probably never going to be in a position to negotiate not to pay this tax. You talk about sort of opportunities to split the tax between buyer and seller. My question is, can the city mandate that the seller pay the tax instead of the buyer?
It is my understanding, I'm not an attorney, it is my understanding that no, they can't. The legal term is joint and several. The parties in the real estate transaction, and again, I'll mention that this is not only residential, but residential and commercial property. So the parties to the transaction pay the tax, and who pays it is one of the points of the deal, I would assume. It's interesting because the feedback that we've gotten from realtors is that the practice is in San Rafael, at least, the seller pays the transfer tax. So, that may well continue. To the questions about the nature of the tax, those are policy decisions. Honestly, my impression of real estate in this county where I grew up is that people charge what the market will bear. And if there's not a 1% tax and somebody's willing to pay 1% more for a house, it's been a seller's market. It's very competitive. Places on the residential side, certainly places often going over asking price. So somebody's getting that differential. But that's a policy decision. And that's ultimately, I think those are issues to raise with the council as they decide whether or not they want to put this on the ballot. Like I said, I think there are only a certain number of tools in the toolkit at this point for cities in the state of California. And this is one of them that's available to San Rafael to address some pretty clear needs. And the follow-on ramifications of that decision is something the council, we all elect them to wrestle with.
So Paul, I had a quick question, clarification question. I think earlier you said in describing how the money could be spent, a lot of it was infrastructure stuff, repairs of park streets. The city's been doing a lot of transportation improvements, bike lanes, narrowing roadways and so forth. Is that type of expenditure, would that be okay to use out of these funds?
Yes. Again, this would be a general tax. One of the, I think, oddities of Prop 13 is that if you pass a local tax measure, if it's a specific tax for a specific reason, it requires 2/3 vote. If it's a general tax without the exact expenditure specified, it's 50%. It's a simple majority, 50% plus one. I personally think that's backwards. I think it ought to be easier to pass something where you say, we're going to ask for this money and spend it on these particular things. And I think it was intentional to make it more difficult myself, but maybe I'm just cynical. But what's under consideration here is a general tax which means the council gets to decide how to spend the money. It has to be within the general definition of things that are of the, what you call legislative intent. So it has to fall within the things that are discussed as the council considers placing it on the ballot. But the kind of things that you mentioned would fall within the definition of infrastructure improvements, including improvements to streets, sidewalks, et cetera.
Okay, thank you. Do any of the members of the public have questions? Seeing none, I'll close public discussion. And let's move on to the next item.
All right. Thank you all very much for the
Sure.
opportunity.
Thank you, Paul, for
Thank you,
coming.
Paul.
Appreciate it.
All right. Good night.
We've got a lot of items to cover tonight. I'm wondering if we ought to skip over 5 and then come back to it. And so we can take the number 6, 7, and 8, and then we'll come back.
I think that's
Is
a
that right?
great call.
Okay. Thank you for your understanding with that one. So number 6 is the Canal Community-Based Transportation Plan. Lauren, do you want to introduce our speakers in the subject?
Sure. Yeah, the Canal Community-Based Transportation Plan is an update of a plan that was done in 2006 or 2008. It's kind of funded by TAM, and then our consultants, Taylor McAdam with Farron Pierce, is leading the update this time. And these community-based transportation plans, they're specifically for disadvantaged or PDAs, the priority development areas, the canal being one of them. So Farron Pierce has done a great job with outreach. And really engaging with the community and figuring out what their issues with challenges with transportation are in their neighborhood. And we're at the point of the report summarizing the outreach, and then we've gotten to the point where we're talking about, okay, what are our projects we're going for, and with those projects you have like short-term goals, medium-term, long-term goals. And like I said, I think Farron Pierce has done a great job with that. We gave you a lot of material in the BPAC agenda packet. And I'm happy to take any specific comments, but I think for the purpose of this agenda item tonight, I want to go over a high level, like this was the process. And this is how we got to this point with these projects, and focus our questions on maybe the outreach process. And if the committee thinks that there's any projects missing, we can talk about that. But with that, I'll let Taylor and Bob take it away.
Okay, thanks, Lauren. Hi, everyone. So I've just got a few slides to run through. There is a lot of information on some of them, so I'm happy to go back and forth within the presentation, but I'll just kind of give the overview as Lauren said. I'm going to share my screen now. Okay, are you seeing it in presentation view, Lauren? Other people are nodding.
It looks great.
Okay, sounds good. So yeah, as Lauren mentioned, this is an update to a previous plan. And we had, it's funded by TAM, the Transportation Authority of Marin, and then is, which in turn is funded by MTC. So this is really a regional process and project type. And then for our work, we partnered with Canal Alliance, which is the community organization in the canal, and they have been like, we really couldn't have done this project without their help. They were instrumental in all of our community engagement efforts. So a big thank you to them. So yeah, Lauren kind of just shared the purpose. So I won't read that to you, but just to come up with a list of prioritized projects. that would really improve transportation outcomes and kind of day-to-day for Canal residents and visitors and workers. We started this actually end of 2021. Kind of the big milestones have come up the last few months, and we are now in the stage where we're finalizing the plan. And our stakeholder process, there were a number of elements. The first I mentioned was partnering with Canal Alliance. The second was we had a resident stakeholder committee. So this, just as it sounds, we had 7 residents from the Canal who participated. The Canal is primarily a residential district, so we didn't have any, kind of like business owners, because most business owners in the Canal are also residents. So we just focused on residents. We also had a technical advisory committee, which included the East San Rafael Working Group, kind of portion of the chamber, and then Marin Transit, Golden Gate Transit, TAM, and Kate from BPAC was on our technical advisory group as well, and the city, of course. And so those were kind of our constant advisors and participants in the process. And then we did a few kind of more one-off engagement efforts. The first was really kind of like a temperature check. We worked with Canal Alliance to put together a WhatsApp, a survey that was sent out through WhatsApp and Facebook. Those are the 2 primary communication channels, they shared with us are most used in the Canal. And they already had some great community channels set up within Facebook and WhatsApp, so distributed through there. We got, I think, about 40 responses, and it was a 1-question survey. So it was just like, what transportation issues are most important to you? And so from there, we took the top results from that survey, and then after speaking with the resident, the 2 different kind of advisor committees, we settled on 3 focus group topics, and we hosted a virtual focus group night where we had 3 back-to-back focus groups. That format was also the recommendation of the stakeholder committee. Multiple people wanted to participate in multiple focus groups, and that was, the most efficient for their time to kind of have them all in one night. So we had that, and then we also had an open house once we kind of had a little bit more information about our transportation solutions. And I'll kind of show a little bit more about those 2 options right now. Or those 2 sessions. So the focus group night was in February in the evening. We had 10 participants, and the conversations were held entirely in Spanish. All of our stakeholder committee meetings were also held entirely in Spanish, with English translation available. We only used that option a couple times. And participants from Marin Transit and Councilmember Micah participated in the focus group night as well. The 3 topics, or the 3 groups, the first one was about lighting improvements. The second about transit stops, like the physical infrastructure. And then the third was about routes in and out of the canal, which was both transit routes, bicycle routes, and pedestrian routes. We touched briefly on, driving routes in and out, but that was not the community's focus. They were more concerned about sort of barriers to the other 3 options in and out of the canal. So then from that, we really kind of refined a list of transportation improvements and asked kind of much more specific questions. We hosted an open house in mid-April on a Saturday, middle of the day. We closed Alto Street, which is where the Canal Alliance offices are located. It's just like a 1-block street. And we had a taco vendor, and that was a great attractor for people to come by. So if they weren't already on their way, we just said free food if you want to participate. And that got a lot of additional participants. It was hosted kind of jointly by our stakeholder committee members. The Voces del Canal group, which is kind of a offshoot of Canal Alliance. They are not officially part of Canal Alliance, but they do a lot of neighborhood organizing in the canal. And then it's Canal Alliance and the city. We've all worked on it together. And in the end, I think there were maybe about 100 attendees. Marin Transit Smart also hosted booths with information, and there was also a COVID information booth for our community-based transportation plan. We had 4 booths, so you can see kind of it building off of that focus group. We had a bicycle and pedestrian improvement station, a lighting station, a transit stop and service station, and then a final station where you could kind of prioritize at the highest level, saying, you know, are bicycle and pedestrian improvements more important than lighting or what have you. Within each individual station, you can kind of see there were much more detailed questions. So here, for example, like this woman is filling out, this is listing a number of routes in the canal that Voces del Canal identified as needing more lighting. And so here you were voting on which of those routes was most important to you. And you could kind of expound on why, if by putting additional information. Over here, we had a map of the county, and you could, we were asking you to call out like specific destinations in the county where you wanted to go via transit that was difficult today. So that kind of level of detail. So we took that information, the information from the focus groups, and then everything we'd been hearing from our stakeholder and technical advisory committees, and turned that into a list of solutions, which you can see here and is in the report in your packet that Lauren mentioned. So there's 11 solutions here. Some of them are kind of grouped at a very high level. So expand transit service, for example, we do explain in more detail like which routes received the most requests and what we mean by expand transit service. That's kind of a more general recommendation, whereas there are some specific ones, like the very first one, the pedestrian and bicycle bridge or canal crossing to 3rd Street. This is something that's been in the general plan for a while. And is a very specific bridge recommendation between kind of Canal and Harbor Street across to connect to 3rd Street about where the high school is. So I'll talk a little bit more about the bicycle and pedestrian specific projects on the next few slides, but here I just wanted to show we then ultimately ranked these based on the level of community support. And at the tallies, a tally was recorded either for a comment made at the focus group, a comment made at the stakeholder committee meetings, a comment made at the open house, or like a dot vote at the open house for a specific project. And you'll see like lighting received the most comments, but that was also because from the very beginning, the community asked to talk about lighting a lot. And so there were more opportunities to vote on it. So we're not going to ultimately say like a number 1 project versus a number 11, but they'll just be ranked high, medium, and low. There's also these 2 projects at the bottom that don't have any tallies, and that's because these are ideas that were provided by the city kind of towards the city or our technical advisory group, Marin Transit, towards the end of our process. So we didn't get a chance, the community didn't really get a chance to like discuss them or vote on them, but they both do go a long way to address many of the issues we heard throughout the process and didn't quite have a solution for. So like the streets team and transit ambassador program is an idea to expand the streets team from downtown San Rafael into the canal to address some of the safety, security issues that were voiced in the canal. And it could also be paired with a transit ambassador program that Marin Transit has had in the works for a while. And the streets team's folks would have the latest up-to-date information on transit changes and whatnot. So I'm going to just keep going through here. There's only a couple more slides. There, again, a lot of information on here, and I can come back to it. It's also in your report, but I'll just touch on a few of the projects that are bicycle and pedestrian specific. So I talked about the canal crossing bridge already. The next one, the traffic calming and pedestrian crossing improvements. There in the report, we do mention a few specific locations that came up a lot in conversations or that folks kind of pinned on the map. But this, we don't call out exactly what type of traffic calming to include. But one thing here to note is that this project, we've identified some quick build solution options where you can just use striping to make some of these improvements at crossings rather than waiting for long-term, kind of curb and gutter construction. Lighting is of course multimodal, but particularly what is in demand as a pedestrian challenge in the canal. And then, transit relates to the pedestrian experience, but I'll kind of skip those for now. Transportation to schools was mostly around like transit service to schools, as well as transit for students, as well as transportation options for parents to get to schools that are outside of the canal, less about kind of safe routes to school type improvements to Bahia Vista School. Then the two more access to bikes, scooters, secure bicycle parking, bicycle education, we kind of put into one package. The first step here is, TAM is rolling out a bike share program later this year, and including in San Rafael and with stations specifically in the canal. So the first step here is to fully embrace that pilot, see how it works for the canal, evaluate, and then if there is opportunity to supplement that program or the pilot doesn't move forward and this need still exists, to kind of fill it in with additional additional kind of support. And then the bicycle and pedestrian crossing improvements at gateways is to really explore. There's two ways in and out of the canal. There's kind of to the southwest, Bellum, which then ultimately, after crossing under the freeway, connects to Anderson. There's going over the Grand Bridge and connecting via 2nd, 3rd, or 4th, although that's a bit out of the way for the canal residents to get to downtown, and then that could also bring you to the SMART trail. So that this project is, none of those are really pedestrian or bicycle friendly today. And so it's kind of looking at those options and seeing which of them presents the best opportunity for a comfortable bicycle and pedestrian connection to get the residents out of the canal and out and into the canal. And then lastly, I mentioned the streets team one, and then sidewalks and streetscape improvements. The canal is a very space impacted district. Most sidewalks are pretty narrow, and just over years there are lots of utility poles and trees and whatnot in the middle of the sidewalks. This is one of the more challenging problems to solve long-term in the canal. because parking is also very difficult in the canal. And so you can't just expand the sidewalk. That would require taking away parking. So this really requires a big survey effort. Thankfully, it also was not one of the highest priority requests from the community. There's lots of other things they want to happen more quickly. And so nonetheless, definitely still a suggestion and improvement here. So I kind of walked through them. The other thing, I'm not going to go too much into this here, but just wanted to highlight it for you, and then that, kind of send you to the report for more detail, is we do call out the time frame for each of these projects. Again, it's listed as short-term, medium-term, or long-term. And then there is this one other option, this quick build option, which is to do, kind of a temporary version of the long-term solution. In this example, this is using striping to create a bulb out. So sometimes you would do that with just bumping the whole curb out, but a shorter term solution is to do it just with paint and bollards. So we call out where quick build options are available. And then we also identify a 5-year goal. And this was really to spell out more transparently, kind of for the canal community and the stakeholder groups we worked with, what's realistic to happen within 5 years, so that they can follow up and really be champions for these projects, which they are very excited about. So we do call those out. I'll just kind of leave this one up here for a second, just to give you a sense of the time frames on some of these. And then I'll just go to my last slide here. And again, happy to go back, but this June is the end of our grant deadline from TAM and MTC. So we will be finishing up this plan. We have the draft in progress, and the TAC that we worked with. So I think one of the most valuable parts of this process is like getting all of those technical advisors together and then getting them on the same page about what they're doing in the canal. So they're all sharing back with their organizations and providing us written comments. And we'd ask that if you have written comments on the plan, if you could also provide them to Lauren by June 8th. And then we'll be taking this to City Council on June 21st. And that will kind of be the end of the city's role with this. And then it does go to the TAM board after that. So that's the high level overview. There's a lot of information in there, but I'm happy to take any questions. Maybe I'm happy to take any questions.
Taylor, if I could maybe add just one quick note. One of the challenges that the community talked about in terms of cycling in the canal is the lack of safe bike parking. Is a big challenge for those who want to use bikes. And so the thought is that the bike share program would be welcomed by those who might, need to use a bike periodically, but don't have a place to store it. Even those who might use it more frequently. One of the issues they think could be of most value is particularly for students who have to go to San Rafael High School to use but the bike share program doesn't apply to those under the age of 18. And so when we talk about supplement, one of the thoughts is that as that program gets rolled out and implemented, to maybe look for an opportunity to do a special program for the youth in the canal to provide them with access to bikes and bikes and to have a safe place to park.
Yeah, thanks, Bob.
So I want to thank our two guests tonight and be able to provide them an opportunity for having our members comment on the program. I also want to remind members to, if you can, keep your comments succinct. We've still got a couple more larger items to go through tonight, but I also realize it's important that we provide feedback to the city and city's consultants on this important project. So with that, does anyone have questions? Lauren, you may have to help me because I can't see everyone. It
Yeah, I
does,
can help.
I don't
Kevin.
see any hands raised.
Kate has her hand raised. Go
Okay.
ahead, Kate.
I just didn't offer a lot of comments, but I did during the technical advisory committee meetings, but I did have, I did look at our master plan and I do think that there was such a great stakeholder outreach to the residents of the canal that we didn't necessarily achieve in our last update. And that I'm hoping that the outreach on the priorities of the community will be translated into English, and that might be available to the BPAC in the future as we update, so that the priority projects, especially the bike and ped improvements, can be folded into our master plan update. Because we could benefit from that outreach as well. Thanks.
Kevin.
Can I
Kevin.
say something? Yeah, this process was awesome in just making me and maybe other agencies more aware of who's around. This Bosis Canal really surfaced in this project, and you have some really, really passionate people in the community, and that they're so helpful in like getting the word out to their neighbors. And so I think we can, any projects we're doing in the canal, we're gonna reach out to Voces del Canal because they're just super, super helpful with that outreach component. And then the other part was this got us a lot better connected to our transit partners. So we had a lot of great meetings with Golden Gate Transit and Marin Transit, kind of got to the bottom of like some of the issues, and we all know a little bit. And by talking as a group, everyone came away with a little more knowledge of the neighborhood. So it's been a great process.
I think Mark had a question.
It
No,
was more of a comment. It was just following up on what Kate and Lauren just said. I read the public outreach portion of the report, Taylor and Bob, and I was very impressed by it. It seemed very complete and something that we could use, as Kate was alluding to. So I'm very impressed. I applaud you all for that.
Great, glad to hear that. Yeah, I think it just partnering with Canal Alliance, who then have the connection to Bosis del Canal, opened doors that, you know, we as consultants definitely don't have, and then even the city often doesn't have in those connections from the get-go. So yeah.
any other member? Then we'll open it up to members of the public. Looks like Jean has a comment or question.
Yes, hi. Thank you, Lauren and Bob and Taylor and Kate for participating in this and doing this. I remember sitting with Jimmy Fishbob at the Canal Alliance and trying to figure out what was happening with biking. And Kate, you were there. And I was also at a, I believe it's called the Leadership Institute of San Rafael. And they had a bang up presentation where they put in a bike tool station. But both times it's very hard to talk to who actually bikes. And I'm wondering how many people bicycling were part of your participants who talked to you. That would be my question. Thank you.
Yeah, that's a great question. You know, we didn't survey all of the folks who visited or participated in our process. You know, the stakeholder committee was really intended to speak for the community. So we asked a lot of questions that were like, you know, when you see people biking in the neighborhood, or folks who, you know, want to or do bike in the neighborhood, you know, what do they think, or what do they say? So even if our even if our stakeholder representatives didn't bike themselves, I think they did their best to speak to biking in the canal. Part of the finding was that biking really is challenging in the canal, like not only on the canal streets themselves, but again, those gateway connections are just pretty daunting. And so I think the number of bikers is limited. I do know for sure that at our open house, at least 2 people showed up on bikes. So there were some people who very explicitly were invested in biking and shared a lot about biking in the canal, but I don't have a more quantitative answer than that.
I would maybe add 2 quick things. One is clearly providing a safer walking environment was a huge priority for everybody we talked to, and particularly for people who end up walking at night, who have shifts that require work shifts or other responsibilities that require them to be returning home at night. And so that was clearly like top of mind for everybody we talked to, was just having a safer walking environment along the streets and crossing the streets. So that was huge. Clearly, I think most of folks use transit a lot, because we heard that from a lot of different people. Where we probably heard more from folks who were cyclists or had cycled or had members of the family who cycled was at the open house, because we had a lot of interest at the table. We had a separate table for walking and biking improvements and a separate table, and we had folks engaged at both. So I think, there was a lot of concern about wanting to improve the connection across the canal, so everybody didn't have to walk all the way down East Francisco, and also just generally improving connectivity for cyclists to the north and south, as Taylor talked about. So, but I would say we probably heard more from folks at the open house than other venues.
Yeah, one other quick comment was, one of the requests we actually did receive multiple times was for the initial request was for more bike racks on buses. But then the alternative solution, which is to have shared bikes at bus stations outside of the canal, was received very well, because I think, again, getting in and out of the canal is really challenging on a bicycle, but the idea and opportunity for canal residents to take transit somewhere else in the city or the county and then get a bike and go to their destination was very appealing, and something a lot of people supported.
Yeah, I want to go on to the next comment. Lori had a comment from the public.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. I just wanted to say that the fact that you included the residents and the public is something I have never heard of in San Rafael, and I salute you for doing that. And I hope that everybody else does things like that, because that's the way to find out what the people really want. So thank you. And if you could see me, I would be standing up and saluting you and clapping. So thank you.
Thank you, Lori. Patrick Seidler.
Good evening. First, I wanted to compliment the community and the city and the consultants for an excellent plan. It's really good to see the investment made in the canal and to try to make this a reality. And I wanted to just voice some support from WTB TAM for the canal crossing, which is a superb idea. And also I think you mentioned it in a section, the Grand Avenue pathway between 2nd and 4th, I think it is, although I think I have that right. But what both of those lead to, and I think it's covered in your traffic calming improvements, but I'm not sure, but it seems that both of those projects would want to see connections on 4th and 5th Street from those areas all the way to West Tamalpais. And so I think that's in the specific plan for that area, but it would be nice to see it referenced in this plan as well. One thing that's not here, and it goes towards the connecting folks to getting in and out of the canal. Both those other projects I just mentioned are really good ones to connect them. But a 101 crossing, and a 101 crossing is not in the latest master pedestrian and bicycle plan, but it was in the previous one. And I apologize that, we didn't get on that more, but I really urge the BPAC and I urge this group to look at a 101 crossing. I think a study is needed. to identify where it is. You know, we think that Medway is a great place for it. And we really encourage you to look at that, because what it does is it really allows the kids that go to school at Davidson Middle School, as well as Venetia Valley School, where there's residents from the Canal going to middle school there as well. It would allow kids to get safely to school. And I think it's a real priority to get that to happen. And I urge you to look at it. And I can't think of a better place in Marin County that needs a crossing of 101 than that spot. The other one is on secure bicycle parking. I'm glad to see that you have that in your list there. And what I'd like to do is say there's an e-bike share program coming down from California.
Patrick, can you try to wrap up?
I was doing that.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, so I was just going to say there's this e-bike program that's coming down for sponsorship in areas like Canal. And we've done some outreach to people in Tiburon, Sausalito, and Mill Valley, workers that live in the Canal. They're very interested in the program, but they need a secure place to park these bicycles that will be provided by the state. We encourage you to look at that. And finally, I'd like to hear about route number 3 if somebody has a chance to talk about it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Patrick. Matthew Hartzell.
Yes, hello, this is Matt Hartzell with WTB TAM. I actually am going to follow up with a few more details about the e-bike incentive program that Patrick Seidler was just speaking about. It's a $10 million program for e-bike purchase incentives. It will provide a rebate to people who are income qualified to purchase a new e-bike. It's sponsored by the California Bicycle Coalition and the California Air Resources Board, and it will be going public in July next month. So we believe there's a lot of people who live in the Canal who would be eligible for this program, and just it's really related to the fourth from the bottom row on this current table. So we just wanted to make sure that everyone in the BPAC and the city is aware of this program. And we're also working with Canal Alliance and Voces del Canal to make sure that they are communicating this program's existence to as many people in the canal as possible, and hopefully increase mobility. Thank you. Bye.
Great. Thank you, Matthew. Seeing no other public members, I'm going to bring it back to our board members. And I think, Ann, did you have a question before I?
Yeah, I did. I just wanted to make a statement that when Lauren and I talked to him, or like a couple years ago, the Canal Alliance, about putting bike racks in the canal, he said that people were so concerned about the bike safety and bikes being stolen, they wouldn't use bike racks on the street. They'd have to take it to their office or take it to their homes. And so that was an issue. I feel like the bike share program might work better if they don't own the bikes, but I do feel like for them to have bikes sitting on the street is not really something they feel comfortable with.
Great, thank you. Is there any more comments from our members before we end the session? Seeing none, again, I'd like to thank Taylor and Bob for coming tonight, and Lauren and Kate for actively participating in this process. It sounds like a wonderful project. And if you could keep us appraised of how this project progresses over time, that would be real helpful.
Absolutely. Thank you, Taylor. Thank you, Bob.
Thanks.
So let's move on to item number 7, which is active transportation program letters of support. Lauren? are you
Yeah, this is
handling
me.
Okay.
So the active transportation program is, we're applying for 2 projects this year, and they're both in the canal, and the timing of the canal community-based transportation plan couldn't be better, because we applied for funding to study the canal swing bridge last funding cycle, and we were just shy of the funding cutoff. And the biggest piece of feedback we got from the evaluators was that our public outreach was a little stale. So this is, we couldn't have more current public outreach and all this great data and documentation. So we're applying for that again, and that's to study and do some of the environmental for the swing bridge. And then once we get that all done, then we would go back to ask for funding to actually build the swing bridge. So that's one project. I hope everyone read the letter. Basically, staff is asking the committee to approve Chair Haggerty to sign the letter. And then the other project is just kind of like a general scoop of all of these accommodations, like quick build projects, sidewalk gap closures, curb ramp improvements. Lighting is a huge one for this Canal active transportation experience improvement project. We think this is a really great one because I think it's a good bang for your buck as far as like all the things we want to build and improve in the canal. And like I said, lighting's a big one. We're looking at like bike boulevard treatments on Canal and some of the streets that are in the bike plan. And the improvements that we're asking for funding for are, many of them are in the bike and pedestrian master plan. So we're excited about that one. So with that, yeah, basically, if you have any other questions about the project, I'm happy to answer them, but this is mainly we're asking for this group to approve those letters of support.
So any comments from commission members? Do we have any comments from members of the public? Seeing none. Okay, so Lauren, do we need to just ask people, should we take a vote on this or?
Yeah, so someone should make a motion that you support the chair signing letters, someone seconds, and then we'll take a vote.
I make a motion that the BPAC support Kevin signing the letters in support of the 2 grant applications.
I'll
I
second
second.
that.
Second. There we go. Who won?
DJ, you can have it.
Yes.
You want
Okay.
to call the roll?
We'll make this official. I'll call the roll. Member Allison,
Aye.
Member Bergman,
Yes, thumbs up.
Chair Haggerty,
Yes.
Member Mooney,
Yep.
Member Powers,
Yes.
Member Solomon,
He's nodding. Yes.
oh, okay. Okay, that is all the regular voting members, so we'll see what passes.
Okay, Lauren, again, thanks you and the other city staff for putting this together. And you'll get the letter from me to sign. Is that what?
Yeah,
what you
I
need?
can send it to you after, I'll send it to you this week if you can
Okay.
sign it.
Or I can come down and sign it if that's convenient.
Oh, okay. Okay, awesome, thank you.
Moving on to item number 8, which is the Vision Zero update. If you recall, our committee had a ad hoc committee comprised of myself, Barry, and Kate to examine the city, to work with staff to develop a plan to develop a Vision Zero program. So what I'd like to do tonight is have staff report on their perception of where we are, and then we'll have Barry represent the ad hoc committee and present our recommendations or findings or current situation, and then we'll have a discussion with our members and then take comments from the public. So why don't we start with, is it Rafat, you want to do it, or Lauren?
I think I offered to take the lead, and I may,
Okay.
if I miss something, Rafat may jump in. So thank you, Kevin. So, and thank you to the ad hoc. This has been, it's been a good process. There has been a little bit of back and forth. The memo, it was included in the agenda packet. I hope everyone had a chance to review it. But really, Vision Zero is big on the ease. And so we wanted to highlight, what have we been doing with engineering and planning? I wanted to document that the city has been pretty proactive in improvements to active transportation, with the uncontrolled crosswalk improvements, adding the leading pedestrian intervals at the signalized intersections, which I observe work all the time with pedestrians getting halfway across the intersection in a car, you know, having to slow and stop for that pedestrian. And as far as engagement, we have projects all over town that, you know, would improve biking, walking, and traffic calming. And they're, you know, they're either we're seeking funding or they have been funded, and we're just working on the design and construction. The Grand Avenue bike path is a really good one. We just talked about connecting the Canal neighborhood, and that will really help people get from the new Grand Avenue bridge all the way up to 4th Street, where they'll be able to go east and west. Enforcement, we work with the police department all the time. I will comment that their traffic department is pretty lightly staffed, so they really do the best they can. And what we do to help them out is do a lot of like collecting data. So if we have a speed concern, we put the tubes down or the stealth radar to figure out, one, if there's actually a speeding concern, and then two, if there is, what time is it happening? Often it's happening, you know, after school hours. So we ask the police department, can you go patrol for between 2 p.m. and 3 p.m. to be most effective with your time? So that's some of the stuff we're taking care of with enforcement. And then education. I'm involved in it's the Street Smarts Marin. So we're updating the banners. There will be lawn signs, and the radar speed feedback signs to remind drivers to slow it down. So we think that our effort has been pretty good in some of those E categories. And then further down in the memo is a color-coded table. I'm a visual person, so I put this together to kind of show. Green is like, we're doing it. Yellow is it's in progress, but we haven't completely finished that task. And then red is we have not started that task. And so there's different pillars to Vision Zero. There's leadership and commitment. And so that's where this resolution that we're proposing to bring to council comes into play. There's safe roadways and safe speeds. We do have a complete streets resolution we have. And then the data, all the data, which we have a pretty good database of collision records, and we can use that in decision making, and we did that with the bike and pedestrian master plan. With that, so that's a kind of a summary of what has happened. And then with all that, it comes down to 3 options. It's like, there are things that we are doing without the name brand of Vision Zero. So it would just be continuing that. The second option is doing a, I forget the order. Is coming up with a resolution and committing to many of the things that the committee is asking. And then the third option is that full-blown action plan. We think it costs about $100,000. It would take quite a few staff resources. And with that, we kind of want to meet in the middle and move forward with a resolution that commits us to things, but also keeps in mind everyone's current bandwidth. So I don't know how to end this. So that's where we're at. We hear loud and clear that the committee would really like a Vision Zero action plan. And we're just trying to find somewhere that meets in the middle that, staff can, we don't want to make empty promises either. So something that staff can commit to, and we feel like that is the first step is moving forward with the resolution. So
we're gonna have Barry talk, but Kate, is there something you need to say right now before?
I was just wondering if it wouldn't be helpful to put on the screen the 3 options or also the table. I'm also kind of visual. And so when you were describing things, I think you may just want to move to the 3 options, but if you could share your screen, Lauren, I think that would be helpful. Thanks, Kevin.
Okay, Barry, do you want to talk about the work that the ad hoc committee's done?
Sure. Thanks, Kevin. So yeah, but I think Lauren gave a good overview of kind of what has happened to date, and I think we're all in agreement about all the great works that Public Works has been doing, and doing a great job securing funding and implementing some really great projects just even in the last few years. And as she mentioned, I think one of the things that we were really kind of hoping for was to undertake more of a Vision Zero action plan. So I think probably and Kevin or Kate, feel free to jump in and add or modify what I'm saying. But I think one of the key things that we were looking at was that, with the various E's involved in safety, that, Public Works is great on the engineering side, but there's also just plenty of other community stakeholders that have a real vested interest in Vision Zero, particularly the safe routes to schools folks and seniors, and we've heard about the Canal District. So I think there's a lot of different interests that could be brought into play. I think Public Works is great at coming up with a lot of the technical expertise and solutions, but to bring that bigger mix into the conversation. So I guess one thing we didn't explicitly ask, but I suppose cloning Lauren is off the table. Is that right? Just checking. Yeah, I understand there's limited bandwidth. But I think a lot of us are feeling that these days in our respective jobs. So we do want to keep everyone working in a way that's productive, and we want to also just keep this moving forward. So I guess the kind of reticence that we had around what's presented in the staff report was, we don't want to go out and support adoption of a resolution that's really just going to be for the sake of adopting a resolution, and want to make sure that it actually has that it results in some kind of forward progress, whether it's toward ultimately getting going out and developing a Vision Zero action plan, or somehow advancing this forward and elevating safety to more of a priority. So we had drafted we take an initial stab at the resolution, which did include more language around developing some sort of a plan. And so I think the question that I was left with after looking at this and after talking with staff was, what is a reasonable path forward at this point, given the resource constraints that the city has, given what we would like to see happen, and at the very least, one of the things that we talked about, which I think would be helpful, is to have some sort of convening of people from multiple departments and stakeholders in the community, and to get a sense of how much they value or prioritize this type of initiative and what they see as their key issues. And then beyond that, because I was just really interested in hearing what the rest of you all had to say, and members of the public who are attending the meeting.
Kate, do you want to comment now, or do you want to listen to other members first, or?
I can listen.
Okay. The other members, comments, ideas, suggestions? Ann.
Thanks. I definitely think the number 2 is an excellent idea. Moving forward, I feel like if we're going for something that's going to cost quite a bit of money, that's going to be harder to achieve. And I feel like it needs something with some strength behind it, that we will maintain it. So I think number 2 actually gives us that goal for Vision Zero.
Others? I'll make a comment. One of the things, as I understand it, the Vision Zero program does is it takes a look at statistics. It takes a look at accidents. It takes a look at what cities have done to mitigate or eliminate injuries or deaths, and there's a measurement factor there. I think what we have with the city right now is, although there's a lot of improvements, and I've got to say that the ad hoc committee thinks that city staff has done a terrific job in terms of making the improvements they've made in the last few years and going out and getting grants and everything. And so we certainly don't want to detract from that. But we feel that there's a real opportunity here for the city to make not only a political statement, but a statement of reality that they want to treat this matter seriously. They want to monitor the situation. They want to monitor the successes. They want to, and it's a matter, I know that, for example, Mayor Kate, one of the things that she's really emphasized both in her campaign and as mayor is community involvement. And I think that's, you see some of it for example, in the presentation that was just done on the Canal District, there was a lot of community involvement there. And I think as a result of that, you're going to end up with some really good solutions. But there's an opportunity to do that all over town. And I think that the Vision Zero, more formal Vision Zero framework provides the opportunity to accomplish a more comprehensive plan that's lacking right now. Phil?
Yeah, I agree with everything you just said. And I think your option number 2 is certainly a great place to start. I don't know if start's the right word. It's a great place to be at. I think it also
Phil, can I stop you for a minute?
Yeah.
The option 2 is the city staff's option. It's not necessarily the ad hoc committee's recommendation.
Sure, but I think what level 2 also enables us to do, if that's what, and lots of this is I would rely on the expertise of Department of Public Works of what they can do right now. And what level 2 would let us do is in the future, say in a 5-year master plan, and if they come to us and say they need a full-blown action plan, that is something you could always potentially add on later. So, number 2 allows you to get started, and then, they can sort of track their progress, and maybe they'll say, we're totally overwhelmed. We need a full-blown action plan and we need to fund this. Or maybe we could all see together when we revisit this, in various goals of the master plan as we put that together, that it's working perfectly. So I think I see that as a good middle ground to start with.
Okay. More comments? I also wanted to just mention that, we fully understand, for example, that Lauren she's working on a ton of different projects, and it wouldn't necessarily be fair to thrust upon her all this additional responsibility. So, I think if going into this, we think, or the ad hoc committee thinks it's important that if the city is going to go ahead with a full-blown plan, that, they identify funding and identify resources to help manage that situation. And I think there may be opportunities right now to get additional funding for example, to bring in a consultant. Now, even with the consultant, you're going to have to use city staff to supervise consultants, but.
I mean, as I read their proposal, I see their level, the option that city staff has put forward, says that they think they can handle grant funding and safety efforts, and giving, I'm fully for Vision Zero having some teeth, not just being an empty statement. Although I do think that statement is very important, and they mentioned documenting the commitment with the city council resolution. I think that is very important to do in this process. So my point is if they say they can do it, I trust that they could do it. And certainly a good place to start, and gives us the option to go a full-blown action plan if a year or 2 or 3 years from now we think it's not going as we hope it goes.
Kate?
So I don't support the staff's recommendation. I support a full-blown action plan. And the reason being that the BPAC as an advisory committee to city council, my understanding is that staff is going to recommend their recommendation, which is a staff level, that the city council adopt a resolution that says we're in favor of Vision Zero, and that the way this will be followed from what I've read is that the city will report out annually on the safety projects, which they are working, the improvements that they've made. And if Lauren, if you would scroll down a little bit, what isn't being done, I'm sorry, back a little bit. What isn't being done currently, there is a lot of green and yellow, but if you scroll up a little bit more, what's not being done is strategic planning, which would involve, thank you, all the departments, which is developing a plan, goals, objectives, and short and long-term action items that would fulfill having an action planning process that would involve the community, whether it's public education, would involve traffic engineering on solutions, would involve planning with our current planning development areas, both in the southeast San Rafael and the Canal area, and also up in Terra Linda, the Northgate Town Center area. And the reason that I think it's really important right now is that there is federal funding and state funding that is at an amount that's unusual, that's coming. And one of the Plan Bay Area adopted transportation strategies was to support regional Vision Zero planning development throughout the region. And there was recently, and I don't know plans myself, I'm not experienced like the Department of Public Works is, but there was at the Active Transportation Working Group meeting recently, a notice of funding opportunity for exactly this, which is for a Safe Streets and Roads for All discretionary grant opportunity that the city could apply for, that's due September 15th. So I'm feeling urgency. I'm feeling urgency to get going on this and take advantage of any transportation funding that might be available for this kind of planning. The city is, the transit center is going to be relocated. We have RENA numbers that are significantly going to increase development, both downtown and in North San Rafael. And in order to do a paradigm shift to prioritizing safety for people to walk comfortably and safely and to ride bikes comfortably and safely throughout the city, we need to have it as a priority, and just having a resolution to me is not enough. And that's my pitch.
Other comments? DJ, any comment? No?
Well, I guess I would just throw out that adopting a resolution might create precedent to make us more competitive in a grant funding environment if we can point to adopted city resolutions showing our commitment, right? So if there are opportunities for funding this sort of thing, documented commitment is something that helps the competitiveness on a grant. And then I also would just, suggest exploring how this type of planning effort might be combined with our next 5-year master plan update, which at this point I think is 2 years away. So, there might be some efficiencies and economies of scale there to sort of blend those programs together.
Thank you. Mark, any comments?
No, I just support this number 2 for the reasons they were already stated.
Okay.
Kevin, if I may.
Sure.
This is Rafat. You might want to take some public input before.
Yeah, that's what I was going to do right now. We'll take some comment from the public. Jane, you have a comment?
Yes, thank you. I am not sure if Lauren or Rafat, you can answer this question, but I'm looking at the guidelines for Vision Zero in the active transportation grant program, cycle 6, which we're applying for the Canal Bridge. And you can get Vision Zero points, 0 to 2. And remember, every point counts a lot. The project must be located in a jurisdiction with a formally adopted Vision Zero bike and pedestrian safety policy or local road safety plan as of June 15th, 2022, or the revised application date. So the question is it in a with a formally adopted Vision Zero or bike pedestrian safety policy? So my question is, can the resolution be worded in such that it counts as a policy by the city without developing a full Vision Zero plan?
With the permission of Kevin, I'll be happy to address this point. Again, this is Rafat Ray. Thank you for giving me the opportunity. Jean, that's a wonderful question. That's to the point. And the Marin County Roadway and Safety Plan qualifies us as an agency to receive those points. And we are getting credits in the ATP Cycle 6 application because the county has a roadway safety plan. And I'll stop here. I think we said enough as staff to try to. I really appreciate what everybody's comment. I totally agree with Kate about the urgency. I don't think the resolution is a minor step, as Philip and DJ mentioned. You know, that adopting a resolution is a big deal. It's not just lip service, as I heard it described, or no, it's you know, it has some teeth, and I think that a collection of your comments could be woven into the staff report to the city council that transfers or relay the sentiments and the urgency and the seriousness of this committee regarding Vision Zero. And you know, and I think that it's a really good first step. We always have a chance to come in a year or maybe less, or whenever the funding opportunity is available, to knock on everybody's door and say, why don't we come up with a plan? But in the meantime, if you can think of anything to put some teeth to this, you know, put some, you know, whether it's reporting, whether it's engagement requirements in the resolution, I know that the subcommittee is going to continue to work on these details before we take it to the city council. And thank you all. I'll stop here.
Patrick Seidler.
Thank you, Chair. Patrick Sider from WTB-TAM. I'd like to thank the BPAC for the consideration, particularly Rafat's explanation of getting the points, because I think that's really key as we move forward with different funding projects. And so thank you for that clarification. Nonetheless, WTB-TAM agrees with Kate. There's so many important projects coming down through San Rafael. And I think what I urge you to do is really take a look at this from a broader perspective, which is Vision Zero is one of the most successful pedestrian bike projects in the history of the United States. It's gone from 0 to 60, or 0 to human speed, faster than almost any project. Maybe Safe Routes to School is the only thing I've ever seen do that well. I think people are going to be looking at those issues when they start allocating funds. And we're already seeing the points that are being awarded for the applications. So I think it's good to go on the record. I think it's good to do the full program. And I think Kate's points were well made, and we support her position on option number 3. Thank you.
Thank you, Patrick. Any more public comments? If not, I'll close the public comment section. I'd like to, I want to thank all the members for their comments tonight. I think they're very valuable. What I would like to propose, and Rafat kind of alluded to this, is we had previously drafted a resolution that we suggested to take to the council. And staff had given it a lot of thought and had come up, and now have come up with their current recommendation. So what I'd like to be able to do is recommend that the ad hoc committee go back, and unfortunately, we don't have the resolution tonight. And I think it would have to be amended from the one that we had earlier discussed because of concerns expressed by city staff. But I'd like to have the ad hoc committee work with city staff on revising that resolution and then bring that back to the BPAC. And that could either be done at our next meeting in August, or hopefully at a special meeting before then. And we'd get we'd at that point ask for BPAC committee's recommendation. Any thoughts from members on that? Rafat?
I think that having a special meeting would be the preferred way of doing it. We really don't want to wait 2 months before we can go to the council with this. I think going back to Kate's comments, the time is of the essence, and I think the earlier we begin, the better it is. That's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Barry?
I guess what I would be interested in hearing, I think, like Rafat said, there are things that can be put in the resolution that may have more teeth to it, and I think that's sort of what I was trying to get at before. And in the draft of the resolution we prepared, one of the items on there was to go forward and develop an action plan. And so if we're taking that off the table, the question that I would like to explore is, what do other members of the BPAC feel like would be something that would advance this and take us in the direction of moving forward, and with the hope of ultimately developing an action plan, but at least some incremental steps in that direction for now that does advance this.
Any comments? Anne?
I actually feel we need to discuss this further, because I'm a little confused also, because I felt like we were just voting on a resolution and then we came and the minutes, or we got the information that we should be voting on a proposed path. And I don't particularly think we've had a lot of background into how we've come, or how the decisions were made to come to points 1, 2, and 3. And then Kate brings up a point that perhaps the funding is someplace else. So I feel like we just need more information, more intel. We need more time to discuss this and see what path we want to go on, and maybe get a clearer view that this is going to give us this, so we all understand what we're voting on.
Thank you. Philip? Any comments? No?
I have no
Oh.
real new comments. I'm happy to have a special meeting. Seems like a great idea to get this moving forward with a sense of urgency.
DJ, any additional comments? No?
None for me.
Mark?
I think in light of what he said about, the timing, and the special meeting would be helpful. And I think Anne's point is also good one. I feel like I'm in her camp as well on this, and just need a little more context, a little more information to be better informed, I think, before I can, talk more intelligently about it.
Well, I think we can certainly set up a special meeting, and at that meeting, we can talk about I mean, we can talk about how we got from where we started to where we are now, what the benefits of, we can recraft the resolution and talk about the benefits of the new information in the resolution. You know, Rafat and Lauren can help us. There's some politics here that can kind of help us through that. So
Yeah, it's clear by the memo that there's a little bit of politics, and I want to be sensitive to that as well.
Yeah.
I also want to be clear too that, you know, the amount of work that Lauren does for us, as well as I'm sure Rafat and everyone else, is tremendous, and so we can't put too much more burden on staff in general. You know.
No one's going to dispute that. So what I hear is a consensus that we'll have a special meeting between now and the next meeting, where we'll discuss this. We'll bring back a resolution with a recommendation, with hopefully a recommendation for the BPAC to consider.
Yeah, so one thing I know about Brown Act is for a special meeting, we need to decide that now. I can't like pull you guys between now and next week. So if Wednesdays are okay with people, I would propose July 6th. I think it might be tough with like holidays and stuff. But I would say July 6th or July 7th.
That will not work. Well, it could work. Yeah, it could work if it's a Zoom. I presume it's a Zoom meeting.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to be out of town, but hopefully I can participate.
Yeah, or July 13th.
You guys have a preference?
How much time do you think you need to work on this? Is it sort of like a month is what you're hoping for, or do you think this is 2 weeks of work? I mean, I would say it's for the ad hoc committee and city staff to decide how much time they want, and then could pick a date. You know, it seems to me like it would be easier to pick a date before the 4th of July holiday, but if you can't get the work done in time, you know, I know that it takes a lot, so.
I know Rafat has some time off too, and I would want.
I'm going to be gone the last week of, I'm sorry, I'm looking at the wrong month here.
I think, Philip, if I may, I don't think there's a lot of work left. I think we just need to focus on the resolution and maybe emphasize the need to be more aggressive to seek ways to get us to the full plan, and seek outside funding, as Kate mentioned earlier. If there is any funding source to bring that extra help, it's the issue is less of politics and more of resources, and you know, it's just how many studies, how many can we focus on, you know, being that the transportation planning and operations staff are present at this meeting, Lauren and I. So you know, it's more of resources and less politics. I think the politics is straightforward. I think Kate mentioned earlier that this is going to be beneficial to everyone. I mean, I don't see any harm in adopting the resolution, and you know, I see all the benefits. So if you want to try to make it quicker and before the July 4th holiday, you know, staff is open to that.
I'm available Tuesday, June 14th or Wednesday, June 15th.
Well, I think that's too early. I mean, you're talking about a BPAC meeting next week or 2 weeks?
That would be 2 weeks from now.
Barry and Kate, what do you think?
That's a bad week for me, actually. I could go the week after, if that's all right.
Could you do it the 22nd, Lauren, and Rafat and everybody else?
I can do the 22nd.
22nd would work for me.
How about for the rest of the BPAC? Looks like Phil could do
No,
it.
this-
Anne could do it.
I'm not available, Mark. If everyone else is available on the best date, then we should just carry on.
DJ, are you available? Because we need a quorum.
Talking about June 22nd?
Yeah,
Yeah, that works for me.
And before that, we will have another meeting of the subcommittee, right? That we would finalize
Well, at least one, yeah.
at least one, yeah. Sounds good.
Okay, well, why don't we go ahead with you said the 22nd is what we're shooting for? Okay,
so a 6 PM meeting, Lauren?
Yeah, unless the committee wants to meet earlier at 5.
And then you'll send out the agenda and it'll include the resolution language and the recommendation, correct?
What was the question?
Just want to make sure that when we have this meeting and it's publicly noticed that the resolution will be included. It'll be a one topic meeting and the resolution will be included, the proposed resolution will
Yes.
be included in the packet.
Yeah, I can work with the ad hoc to figure out what exactly we're including.
okay, so let's go back to item number 5, which is the ad hoc committee updates. Phil, do you have an update on the Greenway?
Sure, I could do a quick
Okay.
update, and for Lauren taking notes, I could email this to you too. A couple of just fun updates of the North-South Greenway. The path over Corte Madera Creek over by Larkspur Landing has been operating and open to the public for a couple months, but it will officially open to the public with a ribbon cutting ceremony on June 28th at the end of the month. This, I guess we just missed it, but the Anderson Drive to 2nd Street segment of the pathway, which was completed 2 years ago, never had a celebration because of COVID. There was a celebration on May 21st. I went down there with the kids. It was very fun. The San Rafael Chamber of Commerce held a Bike the Boulevard event. The third item is on the San Rafael Connection, that Zune Engineering has completed their feasibility study. They presented some of the options of that to us, and they found that a road adjacent route along Marydale Road and North San Pedro Road and a hillside path next to the smart tracks were the feasible options. And so it's sort of awaiting steps by the smart board, and we weighed in on a lot of that at our meeting. And then fourth was that all unbuilt pathway segments all the way from McInnes Parkway, like over by the Civic Center, to the Novato San Marin Smart Station is now in design, and the consultants will bring all of the pathway segments to 100% engineering and obtain all necessary environmental clearances. And the work should be complete by next year. And then we'll start looking for funding and get those out to bid. So all positive news from the North-South Greenway. That's it.
I always enjoy your reports. They're all
Yeah,
positive.
yeah.
And good news recently.
Yeah. So, Kate, do you have a report on the Parks and Rec Master Plan?
I do. The process is underway. The Parks and Recreation Master Plan was something that came out of the general plan update that was adopted by City Council last summer in August. What's really important about a Parks Department master plan is sort of this system planning for public space. And though this focuses on parks and recreation facilities, it's part of a system that includes our civic spaces and our roadways and how we get to and from things. And so I see that as sort of the BPAC's connection to what's going on in the Parks and Recreation master planning process. I just wanted to fill you in on what's been accomplished quickly so far. The consultants started by doing an inventory of the parks, the current parks and the current recreation facility items and also an assessment of their condition. And then they also did a process of community outreach through a survey and through some different public meetings. The consultant also did a document review, and in addition to the general plan, the BPAC, the Bicycle Pedestrian Master Plan, was one of the document reviews, including and as well as a parking and wayfinding study and the downtown precise plan. So they reviewed this, they inventoried neighborhood parks, pocket parks, recreation facilities, including the Alboro Community Center, the Falkirk Center, and both the San Rafael and Terra Linda community centers. Some community parks, some special use parks like Boyd Memorial Park, and the Starkweather Shoreline Park along that pathway there, some community gardens, and then the Harry Barbier Memorial Park. And then they assessed the amenities in terms of improvements needed, infrastructure repairs and replacement, but also accessibility for ADA accessibility, both for parks and the facilities. And then they did a statistically valid survey through Godby in March, and then they followed that up with the Parks and Recreation questionnaire that I mentioned last time, and that ended on May 31st. So now what is underway is the needs assessment. The demand was what the needs assessment are based on the survey and the meetings that the consultant and San Rafael staff conducted. And the supply is sort of what's out there as it is. The next steps, or the fourth phase, is the prioritization and doing a gap analysis between demand and supply of the facilities and the parks that are available. A second public meeting is planned for September 9th. The status of the plan, and if you have time, I recommend that you attend the Parks and Recreation Committee meeting on June 16th. And this is kind of, I think it's really important for me. One thing that came out of this also was one of the highest priority activities that people responded with is that they like self-led activities. So walking, hiking, jogging, those kinds of activities. And one of the most important items that came up is access to parks and recreation facilities via walking. So how pedestrian access to the different parks and recreation facilities was really important. So I guess that's about it. Yeah, that's about it.
Kate, thank you very much. And I really appreciate you representing the BPAC in this effort. Are there any members of the public that have comments or questions regarding the ad hoc committee activities? Looks like Patrick.
Thank you. I wanted to thank Phil for his report on the North-South Greenway, and as you said, it's a positive report. What I'd like to identify and point out for Mayor Kate, as well as the BPAC, is when the feasibility study comes out formally through SMART, there's a really important and timely opportunity for the city of San Rafael, and we're hoping that you'll be supporting and endorsing the hillside pathway alternative, which hopefully will be the preferred alternative, to be the option that San Rafael selects, modifies or updates or adjusts the master bike plan. And as you may know, SMART is funding 30% engineering, environmental clearances, and environmental permits for all other segments in Marin County that SMART runs next to bring those to that position, which is basically shovel ready. And so we urge you to keep your eyes really focused on this project and to go to SMART and ask for that this segment be brought up to the same level as the other segments in Marin County. This is a great opportunity and will also put us in good position for funding from the federal funds coming down in the federal funding programs as well as state programs. So thank you for your keeping track of that.
Thank you, Patrick. Seeing no other public comments, I'm going to close this item. Second to last item is possible future agenda items. Do any members have any suggestions? If not, I will bring up something that's come up a couple times. I think it brought up by a couple members. And maybe Lauren, you can, as I think DJ pointed out earlier tonight, I believe that, the new bicycle plan, it will be due in a couple of years or a year and a half. And I think we need to get started on planning. And so maybe you could put together like a preliminary schedule for accomplishing that. So we get an idea of the time frame and the steps involved, so that we can begin thinking about that process.
Sorry,
Is
so
that
what's
something
the
that we-
agenda item request?
Yes, so maybe for the August meeting, you could give us a preliminary report on that. Maybe a preliminary schedule for accomplishing that.
Bike and ped master plan?
Of preparing a new bike and ped plan.
Okay,
And that would involve, I presume, hiring a consultant and, the time it would take to do that, the time for get the contract in place, public outreach, et cetera, And I know, it would be, not a general plan, it didn't have to be real specific, because that, again, that's going to change over time.
okay.
Any other comments for future items? Seeing none.
Oh,
Go to
Kevin,
the-
you skipped number 9, housekeeping. And that's just, I have a conflict the next regular Wednesday, so I'm just asking that we hold the meeting on Tuesday, August 2nd.
Okay. Does that work for people? Yeah, that looks fine. Why don't we proceed accordingly then? Okay, so with that, I want to thank everyone for attending the meeting tonight, including the members of the public. And the meeting is so adjourned at 8 p.m., right on schedule. Thank
Good night,
you.
Thanks,
everyone.
Kevin.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.